Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special live version of the Spirit of Prophecy podcast. We are celebrating 3,000 subscribers today. Thank you all for helping me get there. Thank you for all the support and the encouragement, the motivation to keep putting content out there. It really does mean a lot, and I do. I hope you are blessed. I hope you learn something from this, and sometimes, too, I just hope you have a little bit of fun. And today's program, I'm going to kind of let you all set the agenda. I'm going to try to pay attention to the live chat, answer any questions that you might have. I also have some prepared subjects that I would like to get into as well, but definitely a lot that we can talk about. It's been a little while since I have done a live episode. And so definitely excited to do that. Just beware, though, with it being live, stuff could happen. I might have to duck out for a few minutes, which I know will be annoying for those of you watching. I'll be able to go and cut it out later. We've got people here working on the AC units in the church. Both of the AC units in our Fellowship Hall area have gone down. And I've got a feeling they're going to need me for something. So if I disappear, I'll be back. I'll just have to deal with that. But anyway, hopefully that won't happen. They've been here for a while and they've left me alone. But I figured once I start the live stream, that's when they are going to need me. That's the way these things usually go. But yeah, before I get into some of my subject matter that I have for today, I just wanted to talk about some current events, some things that are a little random that I didn't feel worthy of dedicating a show to. But definitely wanted to talk about it just because it's kind of a popular thing in the news right now. We've got stuff with the Trump guilty verdict, which has got everybody going crazy. We also have these protests going on in Israel, not the anti-Israel protests in America and all over the world. I'm talking about protests going on in Israel, and I just want to show some things too about that has people scratching their heads and that they don't completely get. And, when things don't make sense, it's usually because you don't have all the information. And unfortunately, people are so misled when it comes to all things Israel. There are images and things that confuse them. And that is by design. They're trying to confuse us on these things, but we're going to hopefully help set everybody straight. So, but anyway, I wanted to go ahead and start out interacting with some of the things that were already left in the live chat. Good to have Ellison Hamilton, faithful, loyal listener, almost always there live. And yeah, he's kind of been here since the beginning. It's been almost a year since we started the podcast. I'll probably do a special 1 year episode. We started right around the beginning of July somewhere. So we got to 3,000 subscribers in less than a year, and hopefully we will more than double that in the next year. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. But Harrison forever. Love this channel, Brother Tommy. I'd like to see more about Daniel and Revelation, particularly Daniel chapter 8, the Whore of Babylon, the beast, and the false prophet, stuff like that. Now, I've been considering for a while going through Daniel on Wednesday nights at our church. I've got a few things I've got to get ironed out, though, when it comes to Daniel, because let's just say I believe I know exactly what I need to do to accurately interpret Daniel, and also how I can prove I am making proper application. Because 99.9% of preaching you've ever heard from Daniel has only been application, not necessarily interpretation. And I'm going to interpret it, and then I'm going to make application. And so when it comes to interpretation of Daniel, unfortunately, we have to rely a lot on history, because much of what Daniel is about are things that took place, with the Greeks, and the Bible does not record any of that. We have that in the Apocrypha. First Maccabees, I've been reading through that. It is fascinating how much it lines up with some of those prophecies in the book of Daniel. And the interpretation of many of those prophecies are about what was going to take place with the Greeks. However, the futurists, they have only ever made application, well, I shouldn't say only, but for the most part, they have made application of those things, and they've ignored the interpretation. And so I believe they've made application in areas where we don't need to. That, we don't have to figure out how this fits into the future. There's no need for it. And so you should have some principles or some hermeneutics when it comes to what we apply to the future in Daniel. And I think if you have some of those that make sense, then it will hold up to scrutiny when it comes to your application. And so, when it comes to the history, I'm not super well versed in that. I am learning, and so that might take me some time before I can be ready for that. So I'm hoping. So Daniel, we plan on really going through that big time real soon. Now, and then Revelation eventually. Not yet. I've got to take care of some things in Daniel before I'll be prepared to take care of Revelation. But when it comes to the Whore of Babylon, okay, now I'm just going to put this out there, and this is where I want you all to help me, okay? What I would like to do when it comes to the subject of Babylon, because I have opinions, but not even strong opinions when it comes to the subject of Babylon. Frankly, I think every position on Babylon has some weak points and areas where things just don't quite make sense. The main viewpoints I'm familiar with would be Babylon being America is one, Babylon being Rome, and then also Babylon being Jerusalem. Those, I would say, are kind of the three main positions that people hold. But the thing is, too, for me, it matters where you date Revelation. If you believe Revelation was written before 70 AD, that is going to greatly affect how you interpret things in the book of Daniel, and especially when it comes to Babylon. I am strongly convinced that Revelation was written after 70 AD. Therefore, interpretations that show that are based on an early date of Revelation, I guess I am not going to take as serious. So what I would like to do, a standing for truth style discussion. I don't even want to call it a debate. I want to call it a discussion. Not that I'm against debates, I'm for them. But I would like to have a discussion where I moderate it and I get three different people that are well-versed in the different positions. One who holds a Jerusalem, one who holds an America, one who holds a Rome. And if I could get three people who have strong positions on those things, who all agree with the late date of the writing of the book of Revelation, I would like to give them all a chance to, briefly kind of give their position. And then I would like to throw arguments at them where I think the weak points are, because I think all three have areas where it's like, okay, like here's the America strong point, but they're really weak over here. Same thing with Jerusalem. And I think Rome, is probably the weakest one. But again, if somebody's strongly convinced, I would love to have that discussion. I would love to do that. So if there are people out there and you hold that opinion, you feel like you represent it well, and you are not an idiot, all right? Meaning you're not going to come on here and turn this into a dumpster fire discussion where your insecurity shows by you just attacking the other side, being vicious, being a knucklehead. There's a time and place for that kind of thing, but this will not be that time and place. This is definitely a subject we should be able to disagree on. And if your response to everything is you're just stupid, there's no profit in that. You can do that on your channel. I'm not really interested in hosting a dumpster fire discussion. So if anybody has any good recommendations for people who aren't idiots, who I don't even care if they're an idiot. The question is, can they behave like a normal person for one discussion? Then I would be interested in trying to set something up. And I probably will not do as good as Brother Donnie does on moderating those things, but I want to do that kind of format discussing those things and give all of them a chance to try to win me over to their side. And I do have directions I lean. I would say I have a position I strongly am leaning towards, but I cannot fully endorse that position until I can answer a few things, and I don't feel like anybody's answering those things. So I'd like to talk about that. I think that would be fun. So if anybody wants to reach out, reach out to me. Let me know. It's like, hey, I think I can represent this position, and we'll see if we can't get something set up. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But anyway, let me get caught up on the live chat. So we've got Family Farm, love ya. Congratulations on the 3,000 subs. Appreciate that. Same from Ellison and Harrison. Forever, always talking about the two brides thing and how that's like a Peter Ruckman thing. And yeah, the two brides thing is, there's only one bride, ladies and gentlemen. And in Revelation, we see one bride and we see one whore. That's what we see. We see two cities. We see New Jerusalem and we see Babylon. That's what we see in the book of Revelation. And there are not two brides. God the Father does not have that. I think that is just a horrifying teaching. And it's embarrassing when Baptists preach that kind of nonsense. But it is very common. And so got Contemplate, Matt G saying, love the channel. Keep up the great work. Randall Wegman, congrats on 3,000 subscribers. Mistletoe, this channel has definitely done more than anything I've seen to help me understand prophecy and suss out the garbage out there too. And that's what I want to do. Again, we do not have all the answers here, but we are not afraid to get to them. We are not here just defending a position. I am not here carrying water for anyone. I'm here I want to have honest conversations about these things. I want to try to sort all these things out the best I possibly can, and so we can have the strongest positions and ultimately get to the truth. And sadly, once people have put stuff out publicly, wrote books, made charts, done diagrams, they end up spending the rest of their lives just defending that. And the problem is, anytime we are in error, that's going to cause a hindrance to us getting farther. And if you are not going to get rid of those errors, you're not going to move forward. And so we all need to be willing and ready. And even when it comes to the 70 AD thing, while I am strongly convinced that it was written in the 90s, I'm not going to go as far as saying I cannot be shaken on this, I cannot be changed back. I'm just saying I've listened to the arguments, I'm looking at the evidence, I'm looking at the history, and I am not seeing a good argument. The one thing I have left to do when it comes to that subject that I have not done yet, and I need to do it, maybe I'll try to remember after this. There's a book that I hear everyone reference. Everybody, when they try to convince you that Revelation was written before 70 AD, they reference a book by, I think it's Kenneth Gentry. I need to read that book and hear him out on his arguments about what he says, because that is what everyone refers to. And he's not a historical source, but he obviously wrote. And so I'd like to look into his sources where he got that. So anyway, hopefully we'll get to all that real soon. But anyway, Rita Woolett just turning in. Congratulations on the 3,000 subs. Thank you very much. God calls Israel, Edom, Egypt, Sodom, and ultimately Babylon. All the judgment prophecies are actually about Jerusalem. There's a lot of reasons to believe that, and never a time and place for being an idiot. Well, there's I guess I should say there's a time and place for foaming at the mouth, which will often get a lot of people calling you an idiot. I'm not saying you can't get ugly with somebody sometimes, but sometimes we need to have some civility. And, you should be able to speak in a coherent way, and you should be able to handle being challenged. And I think Baptists are some of the worst at this. And again, a lot of that is insecurity. One pastor friend of mine, he said one of the biggest problems in the IFB, he always says it's insecurity and pride. And that is very true. That is very true. And I think the IFB is right on most stuff. The problem is they're so married to political parties, I should say, religiously speaking, they're so loyal to camps. And fortunately, those camps have a lot of things right. And so they're just always defending their camp. They're always defending what their guy says, but they've never been taught how to actually show these things and display them from the scriptures. And so that creates great insecurity, because if you're just depending on a man, well, that guy's going to be flawed. And guess what? Opposition is going to point out those flaws, and it's going to shake you in your faith. So, we need to do better and then just being somebody's echo and water boy. We need to learn these things for ourselves. And so I skipped a bunch, I think, on the live chat. But yeah, there's weak points in everybody's view, because there are going to be some consolidations made and new kingdoms made that do not exist yet. And that right there very well could be one of the biggest reasons we're not really figuring it out yet, because of the fact that it's not the time. We're not there yet. So yeah, are you looking to just have pastors on for your Q&A, or a layman welcome as well? I mean, yeah, I prefer pastors, but a lot of times they're not available, they're not willing. Lay people are welcome. But again, I've got to have a reason to take you serious, because sometimes I'll just have like random people that I have no idea who they are. I have no way of checking up on who they are. If there's somebody out there and you've got a YouTube channel and, I'm able to find out something about you, then that's possible. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a pastor, but I'm not just going to accept anybody, because if I do, we're going to have like I don't want to have like some off the wall dude. I don't want to have like a Nick Sayers on who acts like a KJV pre-tribulation guy, but he denies eternal security and he's like his own weird religion. I don't want to have somebody like that. I want to have somebody that represents more mainstream positions. So typically, if somebody is actually a pastor, they've had to kind of establish themselves as something where online people, YouTube figures, they just go with the wind and are always doing something to kind of set themselves apart from everyone else. And they're usually just weirdos. And if I let them come on, we're going to get sidetracked on all kinds of foolishness. And then all the normal people who represent whatever position are going to get mad at me for just like whenever I've had guys like years ago when I had Sluter on, and then all the normal dispensationalists got mad at me for using a Ruckmanite to make pre-tribbers look bad and all that kind of thing. So, but yeah. And so, already had somebody reach out to me that would be interested in defending the Jerusalem position, and I think they would be good at it too. I won't announce who they are at this time, but that would be very possible. And so, yeah, somebody he also recommended possibly Matt first. Somebody mentioned Joe Major. Yeah, those guys. I'm not sure Pastor Major's position. I don't know if he's in America or Jerusalem. I know Pastor First is Jerusalem, and I've had him on talking about it before. And yeah, he makes some great arguments. When I'm listening to him, I'm like, man, yeah, I think you might be right, but there's still a few things that I'm not completely sure on. So, contemplates that only one who is married to God can become the harlot, Old Jerusalem. The church is the New Jerusalem. And it could have been written pre-AD 70 and not circulated until afterward. That argument is futile. I think that argument does matter. It does make a big difference. And I should say it definitely makes a big difference if it was in fact written after 70 AD, because that definitely helps our side out a lot. And that is not my position just because it helps out the futurist position. No, I'm convinced. I don't think it completely destroys futurism if it's written before 70 AD. But I believe it does destroy preterism if it's written after 70 AD. And I'm telling you, the arguments are not good. The arguments are not good. And I'll say this too. if it was written before 70 AD, then there's almost no way you could convince me that it was not about Jerusalem. Okay? But at the same time, too, I think it was. Therefore, I think that could potentially change some things. And so that's another reason, too. That was one of the things I knew I had to figure out before I could have a strong position on who Babylon is I've got to figure out the dating of Revelation. And I said, I'm convinced, and I'd be willing to have some discussions too, if some people want to come on sometime and we can have some friendly discussions about the early dating of Revelation. I'm happy to talk about that, but again, I'm far from convinced. And everybody just needs to stop saying Kenneth Gentry. Okay, I'll read his book. I don't know. Is he? Maybe I should get him on the program. I don't know anything about him except that he wrote that book. But yeah, somebody said I enjoyed the discussion with Woods. Yes, that discussion was very popular. Pastor Woods, he knows his stuff and he's good at teaching. He has different positions than I do on some things. He definitely believes that Babylon was Jerusalem. But he also believes Revelation was written before 70 AD. Again, I don't hate him for that. And he would put a lot of things in the past that I would still put in the future. But I enjoy. In fact, I just watched one of his recent videos that he did. That it's just like I can't really refute what he's saying as far as his interpretation of some things in Daniel that he did. I can't necessarily refute his interpretation. Here's where I'm not sure, and he didn't even really get into this. I'm kind of assuming, but after I listen to that, I think I need to have him back in the program, but I'd like to have a discussion with him about the application of those things in Daniel. That it's like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying on your interpretation. That makes sense. However, does this make futurists wrong in how they are applying this passage? I think that would be a good conversation. I should get in touch with him and have him come on. No, I haven't been in touch with Pastor Brooks in a while. I don't, he's doesn't really have I don't think he's real interested in doing stuff online, and I totally understand that. But he definitely has some good material. It was a couple years ago, I think I listened to some of his stuff, and it was really good. I got a lot of it. I've had a private conversation with him and a couple other pastors before on the Olivet Discourse, and that was a very interesting conversation. But I'm going to go away here for a little bit from the live chat. Go ahead and keep leaving comments and any questions that you might have on there, and I'll try to get to those. But I do want to take some time just to talk about some current events. And so we'll start out. Let's talk about the Trump guilty verdict. All right. So first off, when it comes to the Trump verdict of guilty, here's the problem that I have with this whole thing. One, we are in a bad place in our country. We're in a bad place in any country when you cannot trust the system. We need to be able to trust these systems. That's why justice is so important. That's why we should have blind justice. We should not have respect of persons. Nobody should be above the law. We are everybody's talking about losing democracy. Well, our country is a republic, and we are losing the republic, which is a nation governed by laws. And so because, we have allowed our leadership to allow so much injustice, a lot of times too, because it's in favor of our guy, nobody trusts it. Or at least half the country does not trust any decision or disagrees with any decision that is made. And it is because our leaders have proven themselves to be irresponsible. They have proven themselves to just be liars and crooked. And so when it comes to this case with Trump, my problem with is that I am convinced that if it was anybody other than Trump, it wouldn't have even been a problem. And so the thing is, in a nation, you can't just let people get away with certain things and then all of a sudden, because there's one person you don't like, go after them. That's not right. That is not fair. That is not how the law should work. And so when you see, you've got Hillarys and Bill Clintons that have just gotten away with literal murder, when you've got guys like Bush that have gotten away with war crimes and just all the horrible things that, happened in the Iraq war and just the waste of trillions of dollars and the thousands of lives lost, when you've got a lot of very suspicious things concerning 9/11 and stuff, and these guys don't get in any trouble, and then Trump, but we want to throw him in prison for how we spend some campaign money. That's weird. Okay. So again, I don't like leaders getting away with crimes, but when we've had a long history of letting leaders get away with far greater crimes, and then all of a sudden now we want to go after a smaller one, it's going to make people mad. So they've created this monster. Okay. Even if Trump is as guilty as sin, just understand that it's not going to matter to people because of the fact that they've proven to be partial in these things, and a judge is not supposed to be that way. That is forbidden in the scriptures. It is so important that the Bible talks about having 2 or 3 witnesses. Why? Because it's important when we're talking about somebody's life, especially. It's important. We're talking about somebody going to prison. These kind of things are important when it comes to somebody being done wrong. It is important that that there be justice, and there's blood on our hands as a nation when we don't do anything about crimes. But our system has just gotten so bad, so corrupt, that it's just nobody knows who to listen to. Nobody knows what to trust. And then in the meantime, so you have Trump, who is done a lot of bad things. Okay, so for example, this whole thing involved a you-know-what star that I don't hear anybody defending whether or not that happened as far as his interaction with that woman. And the simple fact is nobody really cares because for some reason, we've decided we don't care about adulterers and whoremongers and being in the White House as long as it's good for the economy. I remember Baptists complaining about that when Bill Clinton was doing stuff. But now we've got Baptists treating Trump like he's the Messiah. And hey, Christians, can we stop sharing stuff like this on social media? Folks, how is this not just blasphemous? People trying to compare Trump on trial to Jesus on trial. This kind of stuff is really bad. And this next one, I hope this was parody, but I don't know. I really don't know. But it's supposed to be Trump and Jesus hugging. Don't worry, they found me guilty too. You will rise again in November. Now, first off, that's super blasphemous. Okay, so somebody might have been doing that to be blasphemous. But let me tell you, if you are sharing that and you are in any way, there's some sincerity to what you're doing, how messed up can you, you are messed up. And so Christians, can we stop sharing that kind of stuff? That is so bad. That is garbage. Listen, Jesus, first off, yes, he had a mock trial, but he was sinless, spotless, holy, righteous. And they could find no fault in him anywhere. Okay? Now, Trump is loaded with faults. And I get it. He's not Jesus. I don't expect him to be Jesus. But you people are the ones out there comparing him to Jesus. Folks, these things don't even compare. Had he not been messing around with women, then people, then this whole thing never happens. He doesn't have to pay hush money. So again, this was a major sin. And you say, well, I don't think he did it. Well, if he hadn't got caught recorded talking all nasty about what he does to women, then, maybe people wouldn't believe it. But unfortunately, he's talking nasty to some guy, trying to act all macho. When he has a history of hanging out with guys like Hugh Hefner, when he's got his multiple marriages, folks, there's no comparison. But again, it doesn't mean that we did not see injustice take place. It is election interference. It is them trying to affect the outcome of the election because we have a decrepit old pervert in the White House who has no idea what's going on, and they need to be able to prop him up just long enough for him to get elected, and so they can have the first woman president, cackling Kamala. And it's sad. And honestly, I could see if they try putting Trump in jail or something like that, I could see this thing getting violent and getting ugly for sure. And I think that's by design. I think they want that to happen. And so again, obviously don't be a weirdo out there sharing these Trump and Jesus pictures, but also don't be that other knucklehead that, to prove how righteous you are and how hardcore you are, you support the sham trial and, want Trump to go to jail. It's like, no, that whole thing is completely wrong how they did it. And even if a guy's a bad guy, we should not cheer for injustice. We should never cheer for that. As a nation, we should all be embarrassed by that, by what's going on in that situation. So, that's mainly all I wanted to say about that. But let's go ahead and look at more chat before I kind of get in the next thing. But Pastor Baldwin was badmouthed by others, and he gained followers. Yeah, Pastor Baldwin, he's another very interesting individual who I definitely have areas where I disagree with him. And he has some interesting interpretations of things. Some stuff I can't completely debunk, but again, I don't agree with the application. And he also believes Revelation was written before 70 AD. And I'm not trying to just cancel everyone who believes Revelation was written before 70 AD. But when it comes to the subject of Babylon, for me personally, I want to have a discussion about that, and from somebody who believes it was written after. Because to me, if I were going to go any direction, it's going to be with an interpretation that has a later date. So that's just kind of an important thing there. But some more of the comments. Let's see. Sadly, there's a lot of people who follow the whole Q thing, probably a lot of overlap. I was shocked back in 2020, some Baptists that were like getting into that Q stuff and thought that was legitimate. But so let me and I forgot to remind everybody too, if you have questions, if you could start out with question, because when I get behind on chat, it makes it easier for me to find the question. But we got Tyler Baker on here. Personally, I believe it was written in 65 AD, but I agree timing of authorship is crucial to our understanding of the events. And yeah, it does matter. And so, I think it's a separate conversation. And so maybe I'll do that one of these days, get some people on, let them convince me of the early date. But anyway, once he's out, we need Nick Freitas to run. I don't even know who that is. I hope you're not talking about Freitas, but I don't know. I don't sure about that name. But here's a question from Brother Daniel. Can you explain that verse where Jesus says, "As it is written, ye are gods"? Obviously, I'm not a Mormon or whatever. Just don't understand what that means. Yeah. So basically, what he was doing in there. So the Jews did not like the authority that basically Jesus was claiming with his words. In fact, I'm going to look it up to make sure I get this exactly right. That would be in John 10:34. All right. So in John 10, it says in verse 33, the Jews answered him saying, "For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy. And because thou being a man, makest thyself God." Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law? I said, ye are gods." If he called them gods, unto whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken, say ye of him whom the Father hath sanctified and sent into the world, thou blasphemest, because I said, I am the Son of God. So basically, he's just showing an inconsistency here. It's like, hey, the word of God cannot be broken, and yet there is a verse that says, ye are gods. Now, what did that mean? Because if you go to Psalms 82, which is what that's quoting, it says, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. And so basically, when we think of the term God as Christians, we think of Jehovah God. We think of the one true God. We think of God Almighty. But there are gods many, and there are lords many. God is like, it's like, for example, Jesus is Lord of Lords. He is the Lord. That's a term of authority. Sarah called Abraham Lord. That showed authority. That she recognized the authority he had over her. So when we're talking about Jehovah God, we're talking about the God of gods. And so God does not have to just be a deity, just as a Lord is not necessarily just and only a deity. It's a term of authority, basically. And so obviously in our culture, we do not use, we don't call anybody gods, nor do I think we should. I think that would be very confusing and misleading. But that's just showing how they have authority. It's like a term of authority. And so Jesus, who is sanctified by God, referring to himself as the Son of God, that's not unscriptural, for one, especially when we have a verse like that. So he's just showing an inconsistency there. But it doesn't mean that we're all like some kind of deities or something like that. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I know it's kind of it's a little confusing, but I think if you pay close attention to what all he's talking about in Psalms, it kind of helps you understand that. But Mr. Incredible, problems with amillennialism. I don't know what that means. But question, what do you say to those who point to Daniel's 70-week prophecy having unfulfilled week of tribulation for the Jews? I haven't able to debunk. Thanks. Yeah, so the thing is, the 70 weeks of desolation were for the Jews. It was specifically for Jerusalem. It was about 70 weeks of desolation upon the holy city and upon Jerusalem. So here's the problem. The dispensationalists, they are correct when they're saying this is about the Jews. Here's where they are incorrect, when they create a 2,000-year gap. That's where they're incorrect. Now, in the post-trib world, here's a problem that we have in the post-trib world. Okay, they're closer to the truth, but there's still an inconsistency. Not only is it important that it's important that we are accurate in how we explain certain things. So many in the post-trib world, what they would say is that, the 70th week is still to come. They would also say they're a gap, but it's not about the Jews. It's about the whole world. It's about the tribulation on the whole world. Well, first off, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because Daniel 9 is all about Jerusalem. So to just all of a sudden throw that and interpret that as tribulation that's going to come on the whole world that we see in Revelation, well, that's a big leap, and that doesn't make sense. Here's what post-tribbers need to do. They need to be more accurate in what they're saying, and they need to be like, yes, this was about the desolations upon Jerusalem, but I believe that the 7 years, the 70th week of Daniel that came on Jerusalem was a foreshadowing of what God was going to do on the world. Because Daniel's 70th week, what that actually was, is that was God proving to the world who he had, Jesus Christ at his ascension. He claimed all power and all authority in heaven and in earth, and he commissioned his disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So as those disciples went into all the world, they had authority from Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the ruler of this earth. And so just like Jesus was ruler of Israel, and they were judged for what they had done with what God had given them, and they were destroyed in 70 AD, one of these days, God is going to, and he did that after his day of visitation, after that triumphal entry. But we also know that one of these days, Jesus Christ is going to come again, and he is going to judge the world based on what they did with the gospel. So Daniel's 70th week was a foreshadowing of the events of Revelation that are on the whole world. But Daniel 9, there is nothing in there about global events. It's about the desolations of Jerusalem, and that already happened. And so what we have to do is we just have to be honest, and whenever we use that as proof for our final 7 years, whatever, we need to just say, I'll make an application. Well, do you believe 7 years? Why do you believe 7 years? Well, not because of Daniel, because of Revelation. We have 3.5 year periods mentioned in Revelation. And so if somebody wants to make an application from Daniel, that's fine, but we can't ignore the interpretation. And that's what many even post-trib people are doing. And, if you go to dispensationalists and be like, no, right here where it's talking about Jerusalem, it's actually talking about the church. Right here it's talking about the Jews, it's actually talking about the church. They're going to look at you like you got two heads, because that doesn't really make sense. But what does make sense is when we recognize, no, this was about the desolations that came on Jerusalem. It came on Jerusalem, and it was a foreshadowing of what we see in Revelation that's going to come in the whole world. Just like God judged Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord is going to judge, he judged Israel, and he's going to judge the world. And it looks like I am losing connection. I hope it doesn't have anything to do with the work that is going on out there. But if I'm cutting out, according to my thing, I cut out there for a little bit. It could have something to do with the work they're doing out here. So hopefully I don't lose everybody. And hopefully you caught all that as I just eloquently explained Daniel's 70th week in a way that will straighten out the world. But anyway, hope that helps. And so, no, I'm not Nick Frittis. He's far right conservative. All right, sorry. I'm not good at reading and talking at the same time about other things. So just trying to see if there's any more questions in here. I say Jesus' ministry was 3.5 years, 40-year transitional space, and 3.5 years for the Roman War, Jacob's trouble. I don't know. I haven't completely nailed all that down yet and then question, but the abomination of desolation that Jesus tells us to look for, also from the book of Daniel, this is where I find no answer. Well, again, what was Jesus talking about in the Olivet Discourse? The Olivet Discourse was also about Jerusalem. They're looking at Jerusalem. They're on the Mount of Olives, looking over the city of Jerusalem, looking at the buildings of the temple, and Jesus said that there would not be one stone left upon another. That temple was going to be destroyed. It was going to happen in that generation. Upon them are going to come the blood from Abel to Zacharias. They were going to pay the consequences, and sure enough, they were judged. The Olivet Discourse, we make application for the future. Because again, the events of 70 AD and that time of tribulation was not the fulfillment. It was not the fulfillment of the Olivet Discourse prophecies, but it was a foreshadowing of the events that have been spoken of since the beginning of time, and that is the resurrection and final judgment that happens to take place at the return of Christ. Those things are foundational beliefs from the beginning of time, and Jesus did those things that he did in the first century were proofs of what is to come. And so salvation, and I always illustrate it this way, salvation has been available since the fall of man. And and people got saved based on the promise of a Messiah. And then when Jesus Christ came, that promise was fulfilled. Jesus made provision. And so now people get saved, and we look back on that provision that was made, and that provision that Jesus made fulfilled the promise that was made at the garden. But even though we're saved now, just like they were saved before the cross, we are still waiting for the possession of what was promised and what was provided for, and that is total righteousness. Not just imputed righteousness, not just righteousness in the spirit, but in body, soul, and spirit, We are waiting for that, and that will come at the return of Jesus Christ and at the resurrection, when we will receive a new and glorified body. And so it's all one salvation, but we have the promise, we have the provision, and then we have the possession in the future. And so there was a promise of a resurrection from the beginning. There was a promise of judgment. We see Enoch prophesying about these things. When Jesus came in the first century and he rose from the dead, and then later he brings judgment upon that old covenant system and old covenant Israel, those things were proofs. Those were proofs of what he had promised many years ago, that he is going to judge the world in righteousness one of these days. And so the Bible always, before the destruction of Jerusalem, it always used Noah's flood and Sodom and Gomorrah. And every time it would bring those things up, it was always proofs that God's going to judge the world. Those were warnings. God hasn't been just promising judgment for 6,000 years with not giving us any samples to prove that he can and that he will. And the destruction of Jerusalem was one of the greatest proofs of coming judgment that it ever did. If God was willing to judge the angels, his own angels, if God was willing to judge his people, if God was willing to judge Jerusalem, if he was going to destroy them for rejecting him, what do we think he's going to do on this world that the gospel has gone to? You know what he's going to do? Exactly what he did to Jerusalem, exactly what he did to the pre-flood world. He's going to destroy it. And so where preterists go wrong is they take those proofs and they make those things the fulfillment of prophecy. That would be like looking at the resurrection of Christ and saying, because Jesus rose from the dead, we've already had our resurrection. No resurrection coming in the future. No, because Jesus rose from the dead, we know we will rise again in the future. And that's what 1 Corinthians 15 is all about. Because Jesus judged Jerusalem like he said he would, we know he's going to judge the world like he said he would. The problem is, futurists, we've always ignored the first century stuff. And so the preterists are coming in, rightfully pointing out some things, but then they're jumping to a very false conclusion based on this little truth that they have latched onto that the futurists have ignored. And so we've got, and just another commercial, I'm going to be on Standing for Truth tonight, 6 p.m. Central, and we're going to be talking about some of these things. So I probably shouldn't talk too much about that. I got to save something for tonight, but hopefully, so that abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, well, that was what was going to come on Jerusalem. That already happened. Okay? And futurists lose their mind when you say that. They absolutely lose their mind. And it's like, but no, the abomination of desolation is not in the book of Revelation. Well, yes, it is. When the Antichrist goes into when the beast goes in the temple and does the mark of the beast, okay, is that the same thing, or it was the abomination of desolation a foreshadowing of that? Those are two different things, but one was a foreshadowing of that. Just like Christ's resurrection was not our resurrection. Ours is still to come. So this has been a pattern with prophecy throughout the scriptures. And for some reason, everybody changes the rules when it comes to things that are in the future. So let's keep, every time I scroll down a little bit, it skips all the way to the end and then I get lost. But anyway, Linda M., when Jesus said, "There never has been nor ever will be a time as severe as this," was he referring to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D.? I think that was the interpretation of that. But yeah, that's a tough one, because for sure, again, here's another way we can explain that too, because we're like, no, it can't be, because we're expecting worse things to come in the future. And I am expecting worse things to come, but here's the other thing too. It's like, because these things were foreshadowings, okay, it's kind of like the story of Ishmael persecuting Isaac. In that story where Ishmael is persecuting Isaac, that was a real legitimate story that happened. Okay, there was a time when they were having a celebration for Isaac when he was weaned, and Ishmael was mocking him, and it made Sarah mad, and she said, cast out the bondwoman, and Abraham cast her out. That all happened. Okay, but did you know that that story, when it was put in the Bible, was also prophetic about the Jews persecuting the Christians? It was prophetic. It was an allegory. And so again, I don't think when we say that the event of 70 AD was this terrible time like no other and time like Jacob's trouble, that all of a sudden now it can't have any application for the future, because then it's like it's like it happens twice. No, because again, that event, it was an allegory, you could say, of what is to come. Because, I mean, folks, look at what we see look at if you look historically at what happened in 70, it was a time like no other. I mean, it was a absolutely horrible time for them. But look at the Revelation. It's definitely worse. But again, too, it's global. It's a different kind of thing. So when we have a prophecy directed at Jerusalem and it's a time like no other, we can also have a prophecy directed at the world where it's a time like no other. And so for Jerusalem, they never had another time like that. And for the world, they'll never have another time like that. And so if God was making a prophecy towards, Liberty Baptist Church, and they are going to go through a time like no other, it doesn't mean that now, nowhere else in the world in any other church, they can't also have a time like no other. So, it's all about how we apply these things. And that's why, too, I'm not totally convinced that a lot of things are going to go down like a lot of people think in Jerusalem, because it seems like they already kind of got theirs. But I don't know. I'm open to ideas on that. But anyway, Matt said I haven't noticed any audio drop. Okay, well, that's good, because on my thing it was showing red like it wasn't streaming, so that's good. But Linda, or is this a reference to dual fulfillment? The pre-tribber site is only a future warning. And again, I am more and more rejecting the term dual fulfillment. I think foreshadowing is a better term. I think that's more accurate. Dual fulfillment, it kind of implies it gets fulfilled twice, but it's like, no, so for example, in Matthew, when looking at Christ, there's all kinds of things that it might be fulfilled which is spoken to the prophet. Out of Egypt have I called my son. So Jesus was the fulfillment of that prophecy, out of Egypt have I called my son. But at the same time, too, in Hosea, I think it talks about it, and it's like it's referring to Israel. And so what he was talking about then had a fulfillment, but Jesus was the true fulfillment. So is it dual fulfillment, or was what happened with Israel a foreshadowing? Okay, and also, too, sometimes, especially with the prophecies Jesus fulfilled. So for example, out of Egypt have I called my son. Well, here's the thing. When God called Israel out of Egypt, they went into the wilderness and they failed in their times of temptation, and they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. God was trying to accomplish something when he brought Israel out of the wilderness. But what God was trying to accomplish was not fulfilled through Israel. But later, when Jesus, who's from Israel, he comes along, we see him in the book of Matthew fulfilling all these things that Israel failed to fulfill. Jesus comes out of Egypt, just like Israel. Israel, after they come out of Egypt, they are baptized when they go through the Red Sea. We see that in 1 Corinthians. But in 1 Corinthians it says, but with many of them God was not well pleased. When Jesus got baptized, God said, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. After Israel goes to the Red Sea, they go in the wilderness. They fail in their 3 points of temptation. Jesus goes in the wilderness. He's tempted in all points as Israel was, yet without sin. Jesus succeeds. So we see this. So the thing is, there were many prophecies that were pointed to Israel, but Israel failed in those things. And so while a certain timeline was fulfilled, what was prophesied was not fulfilled. It did not come to pass, but it was fulfilled, and it did come to pass with Jesus Christ. And so it's the same thing too. In the Olivet Discourse, when you read these things for sure, things like Jesus Christ returning, gathering the elect, those things were not fulfilled in the first century because of the fact, again, Israel, Old Covenant Israel, failed. So I do believe at Christ's second coming, we are going to see Jesus fulfill those things that went unfulfilled. So what we need to do with prophecies is sometimes we've got to realize there are spaces, you could say, or gaps, if you want to call it that, simply because of the fact that certain elements of that prophecy went unfulfilled because those prophecies were dependent on what Israel would do under the law. Now, what we see in Revelation, it's written differently because those prophecies are dependent on what Jesus Christ is going to do. And there's no question about what he's going to do. He's going to succeed. So again, what we're looking for in the future, this is where we need to have conversations about what went unfulfilled. Some things went fulfilled, some things went unfulfilled. So I think you can make a good argument the abomination of desolation went fulfilled. Okay? But obviously the return of Christ that was not fulfilled. So I don't think we need to see another abomination of desolation. I do think we'll see, the mark of the beast and things like that. That's definitely, there's the similarities, but there's differences too. So it's I think dual fulfillment is just kind of a misleading term that's going to cause a lot of questions. And so I'm going to try to start answering some of these questions a little faster. I'm getting long-winded, but Andrew H., could you give a quick overview of the next events of end time events? Well, I will give my opinion on those things. The way I think it will play out, I do think we will get to a point where the world is going to unite around Israel, and they're going to help them rebuild the temple. And when they do, that will be the world uniting in the greatest rebellion since the crucifixion of Christ. And I believe that will be the falling away. And I believe that at some point after that, the man of sin will step forward and claim to be the Messiah. And it will be demanded that the world worship him and take his mark. And so how all that's going to play out, obviously, I think it's going to play out through wars, famines, pestilences, and so a lot of the stuff we're seeing going on globally right now, it could lead towards that stuff. It might not. So, but I think that's the key event, though. The key event is going to be the decision to rebuild the temple. And Christians, I do believe Christians will unite. I believe Christians, in quotations, will stand with Israel, and they will unite with Israel, and that will be the great falling away. I believe those who are truly saved will wake up at that point, and they'll realize the error of their way. But I do believe that Zionism, supporting Zionism, is supporting the Antichrist system, without a doubt. And so that's a quick overview. But question: do you think you'd ever go on the Baptist Bias podcast? Probably not. That's all I'll say about that. Thank you for answering. Thank you for answering my question, Pastor Tommy. No problem. Any relation to Dr. Grady McMurtry? Not that I know of. No, I've listened to some of his stuff. Got a cool name, but as far as I know, we have no relation. And so contemplate if Mystery Babylon was Jerusalem, then the abomination caused it desolation. B-O-R. I'm not sure if I'm reading that right, but anyway, but yeah. So I think I'm caught up on that. So the last thing I did want to point out too, though, on just kind of current events, and we've already gone an hour, all right, but I haven't even been paying attention. Has anybody even watched? Oh man, we got up to 38 people watching. All right, so we'll let me share one more current event with you that I just want to try to give some clarity to, because again, Christians are so biblically illiterate these days. I'm seeing it on Facebook, in churches, Christians standing with Israel. I saw some video footage of a church. They just had this Hope of Israel conference, and they had Israeli flags all over the auditorium. And one of the things that is being used to deceive dumb Christians, Fox News Baptists, into doubling down on their support for Israel is these blue-haired freak show pro-Palestinian protests in college campuses all over America. Obviously, it's like, well, yeah, we're not going to side with those freak show protesters, right? So obviously whatever they're against, we're for, and they're against Israel, therefore we're for them. But this Americans are so ignorant of politics in other countries, how things work in other nations, and we've been brainwashed with a lot of these things. And so I want to show you this one video that I think is pretty funny, and hopefully I can talk while this is going on. But I totally got the wrong idea when I saw this video. But here's the video right there of the guy holding the Israeli flag getting hit with a water cannon. And look at all those people holding those Israeli flags, getting hit with a water cannon. Look at those anti-Semites. Here's another group of good, wonderful, Israel-loving, Israel-supporting people getting hit with a water cannon. Look at those anti-Semites spraying down these people holding these Israeli flags. Can you believe that? And can anybody hear it? Hopefully y'all can hear what I'm saying while I'm doing this here. But yeah, look at those people standing with Israel, standing for Israel. Now, when I saw that video, I thought that was probably a protest, a pro-Israel protest somewhere in Europe, some liberal country somewhere. Does anybody know where that was? That was in Israel. That was a protest of the Israeli government going on in Israel. All those people getting sprayed down with those Israeli flags, that was in Israel. That was the Israeli government that you stand with, pre-tribbers. That was them spraying them down. That's who those anti-Semites were. They were Zionists. And that's what people don't realize about the Israeli government. And that's why, too, I laugh at some of these people who want to stand with Israel all the time and wave the Israeli flag. Well, it's like, which Israel are you talking about? Which Jews are you talking about? Because, again, a lot of your Orthodox Jews are non-Zionist. They don't support Zionism. So do you stand with those people? No, the reality is these hypocrite, biblically illiterate Baptists who stand with Israel, they don't stand with Israel. They don't stand with Jews. They're not trying to bless Jews. They stand with Zionism. They stand with Zionist Israel. They stand with Zionist Jews. Let's just be accurate and let's admit that. And they're anti-Semitic against non-Zionist Jews. That's the reality of it. And so what's going on in it, the Israeli people hate what's going on in their nation right now. They don't hate the Palestinians as much as the Zionists hate the Palestinians. Many of these Israelis, they're for a two-state solution. They want peace. They're protesting their government. They were protesting their government before October 7th. Netanyahu has been this close to losing his spot as prime minister, and Netanyahu is for sure a war criminal. He's doing horrible things to the Palestinians. He's doing horrible things to his own nation. He was doing horrible things to his own nation, and the people of his nation hated him for it, and they've been trying to get rid of it, and he has been using every sneaky tactic he can to hold on to power. And let me tell you, nobody needed the war, nobody needed the October 7th attack more than Benjamin Netanyahu. And so the Zionist Fox News Baptists are getting confused. They hear CNN, they hear these other people talk to the different people, like CNN, they'll bash they typically bash Israel to a certain extent, a lot more than Fox News does. And so people are hearing that and they're thinking, yes, and they'll talk about the far right government of Israel, and they'll say Benjamin Netanyahu is the far right prime minister. Well, we have been conditioned as Christians that when we hear far right, we think good. Yeah, we're far right, far left, that's the blue-haired, protester crowd. And so when we hear far right in Israel and we hear about the left in Israel, we're like, well, man, we should stand with the far right. And the truth is, those people getting sprayed with water cannons, you know who they were? They were the left in Israel. They're the left wingers over there. Okay, they're the people too, and this is what you're not gonna like, but they're the same people too that in Tel Aviv are probably gonna be marching in the gay pride parades and things like that. The sodomite capital of the world. And so the thing is, it's like, whoa. So we're kind of glad to see them getting sprayed with water cannons and things like that because they're left wingers, but they're also standing against their guys like Netanyahu. So people on our side, we get conflicted when we see these things because of how we've been conditioned by our news media. But it's really not that complicated, folks. Here's the solution. They're both bad guys. That's all there is to it. The far right and the far left are both bad guys. The far left or the far right, they don't want the Palestinians there. They are Zionists. They want all the land. They want total control. The left wingers, okay, they're a bunch of communist hippie types. That's what they are. So, there can be too bad. Why would we expect there to be some element of good in Israel? It is a land that is one of the most Christless lands that there is. And the reality is, if we were to find whatever the percentage of Christians are in Israel, and I don't even know what it is, most of that's going to be within Palestinians because it's the Jewish state of Israel. Why would we expect good to come from that government? We would not expect it. Why would we expect good to come from a Palestinian that's predominantly Muslim? So we can understand why both are bad. And it's the same thing too, even in America. Republicans, Democrats, they're both bad. It's a power grab thing, and we the people, we're just pawns. We're expendable. Who cares if some of us die? As long as they hang on to power, and it has been that way in governments since the beginning of time. But we've all been taught there's always good and bad. No, sometimes we get stuck in the middle of bad and bad fighting, and so I personally find it kind of satisfying, watching their far right, wicked Zionist government hitting their nut job left wingers with water cannons. It's two bad guys fighting against each other. And so again, Israel is completely divided, when it comes to all these things, not between Jews and Palestinians, between Jews and Jews, and kind of like America. And so anyway, I thought that was funny, but people need to do a better job of just recognizing what's going on. But I'm going to go ahead and read any final comments that we have on here. Got Family Farm. Is it pride that you won't ever go in debate with the Baptist bias in your interpretation of Bible end times? First of all, how did you know that was what I got invited on for? That is what I got invited on for. Is it pride? Why is that your ultimate go-to? Is that why you wouldn't do it? No, frankly, I just all the ones I've seen from there have just been kind of dumpster fires, and I'm just not really interested in that. So, just not interested. But anyway, my pastor is pre-trib and all that, but hates that America supports the state of Israel and all that political stuff. Well, good for him. I think the one good thing about all that's happening, I do think there are more and more Baptists that are kind of waking up. One thing that Baptists aren't going to want to admit, but when the Ukraine conflict started, I saw a lot of Baptist preachers siding with Ukraine big time. They loved Zelensky, especially when they found out he was Jewish. They went nuts over him, but it was quickly revealed what a pervert that dude was, and they have all changed their mind on that. And so, and so the same thing's happening with Israel. People are seeing what's going on there, and they're horrified. I mean, if you can't see what's going on in Israel, that what Israel's doing in Palestine, you can't see that that's just wicked, then I don't know, you're blind. It is so obvious. And some people are toning the support down, but they're not going to go as far as, they would never, they're too scared of saying, I don't stand with them, because they're afraid they'll get a curse on them. The Genesis 12 curse is going to come on them, and they don't need to worry about that. They really don't. But anyway, when is your debate with William Bell? That got delayed again, and I believe it is now going to be on July 12th. July 12th is, we were supposed to do that tonight. That's what we had scheduled, but since he wanted to delay it, so we're going to do our own discussion on there, and then we got that coming up. But I wasn't trying to stir anything up when I asked about the Baptist bias. I, like both you guys, just curious. Yeah, no, some of it's okay. It's okay to ask, but yeah, there's just some things that are just not really worth it, because again, the whole point too of my discussions that I have on this program, I like talking with people I disagree with. I like debating these things, hashing them out. But one thing that you will notice with people I've had on my program that I even disagree with, we keep things civil, we get along with each other. And some people in some groups, you can't do that, and in some groups, if and especially specifically with that crowd, if I say something that kind of goes against their agenda and people listen and they feel threatened, then it's just like damage control sermons get started. I did a discussion a couple of years ago or a few years ago on Daniel's 70th week. And then, that very next Sunday, what's going on? Pastor got to preach damage control sermons, 2 sermons on Daniel's 70th week. In fact, I believe their first podcast, I never watched it, but I believe their first podcast was about Daniel's 70th week. That I believe I may have got some honorable mentions in there. And so, unfortunately, they're just not capable of not turning things into a total drama fest, dumpster fire foolishness. And so it's just like, hey, I don't hate people who disagree with me on this, but y'all are going to make it hard if when we disagree, we have misrepresentations, which I have no respect for people who misrepresent other people's position. When you have the ad hominem, and then 2, any group that has put out publicly some of the horrendous off-the-wall accusations against me without ever publicly recanting those things, why would I want to mess with that? And I've had people that have gotten mad at me because I've not addressed some of those things. But in that movement, they've been taught how bad the Constitution is and the founding fathers were all reprobates. But I agree with our founding fathers that the burden of proof is on the accuser. We are not required to prove innocence, but they are required to prove guilt. And so when people are just throwing out insane accusations, I don't have to respond to those things. And the Kool-Aid drinkers are going to believe no matter what. That's just the way that works. And so, just not interested. I hope they do their thing, get souls saved, but I hope they leave me alone when it comes to some of the foolishness that I don't want to be associated with. And so, but yeah, for one of you, differ with them about the number of years Israel is in Egypt, and Daniel said, yeah, listen, I definitely defer on the number of years Israel was in Egypt, but boy, what a stupid thing to just get so upset over and ugly over, that I definitely disagree, and I for sure am right. For sure I'm right. But, I don't care. People can be wrong on that and not be a heretic. They really can. And you got to have quite the ego to get that upset over somebody who disagrees with you on that. But that is easy to prove. Let me just give you all one proof. All right. Just to stir everybody up now that I'm talking about it. Moses, his mother was Jochebed, who was the daughter of Levi. Okay. So, how do you get 400 years out of that? So Levi, who went into Egypt, and he had a son, Kohath, and I believe it says he had him while he was in Egypt. He bore Kohath in Egypt. Kohath begat Amram, and then Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, who was the daughter of Levi. Okay, now there are a couple places in the Bible where you can see in the genealogies where it skips names. But when it comes to Moses, it directly tells us his descendants. It was Levi, Jochebed, and Moses. So how do you get 400 years in that? Unless they were like 200 years old when they're having these kids. There's no way you can make the math work. And you can do the same thing with the line of Judah. And so did Judah skip genealogies? Did Levi skip genealogies? Too. I mean, everybody's conveniently skipping the genealogies for this. That doesn't work. Levi was Moses' grandfather / great-grandfather. It was his grandfather on his mother's side and his great-grandfather on his father's side. You cannot get 430 years in there. You can't do it. But you know what you can get? 215. Easy. So anyway, I'll just throw that out there for you, and has nothing to do with prophecy, but y'all can go run with that. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the live stream. Again, thank you for the 3,000 subscribers. And listen, man, like these things, share them. That stuff helps. That helps the algorithm. When you watch the videos, watch the whole thing. Leave a comment. Do all that stuff. It really helps get it out there. Let's make the algorithm work in my favor and get more of it out there. It will, I guarantee it will help if you do that. And again, looking for recommendations on the Babylon discussion. Anybody capable of not foaming at the mouth when in the presence of someone who disagrees with them, who's got the positions on Rome, Babylon, or America, I think it'll be a lot of fun. And so looking for volunteers, recommendations. Let me know, and we'll see if we can get that together one of these days. But either way, if you can tune in tonight, it'll 6 o'clock, Standing for Truth channel. We will be talking about prophecy and preterism. And so I appreciate y'all joining me, and we will see y'all next time. God bless.